Okay, everybody. So, as I emailed you this morning, my throat is bothering me. Just so you know, I don't think it's a virus. I think it's that I've been having to do a lot of yard work, and I think pollen has been bad, and it's not my friend. It's not agreeing with me. As I've been up and moving around, it appears some of it has drained out some. So, my hope is that by the time we have conferences for these, I'm back a little more full speed. I also think that the workload that I've been having to endure also hasn't really helped me a whole lot because, as we all know, the more stressed you get, um, the the more the more likely you are to get sick or things hit you harder. And this teaching online thing has just been um, very little short of a nightmare um, for me anyway. I'm sure a lot of your teachers probably feel the same way, but I've tried to do, I've been doing video lectures, sometimes two or more a day for, the last, what have we gone through now? 2 weeks? Um, it's a lot, and it's a lot to just be sitting here in my room making these things. So again, I'm not making excuses. I'm just kind of letting you know that, that's probably why I'm a little under the weather. So getting to the bulk of this lesson, again, kind of what I said this morning, only like three people turned any of this stuff in, and none of them actually were done the way I asked and the way I explained. And I don't want that to come off like, again, me, cracking on you guys. That's not what it is. It's just you have to understand one thing about me helping you write a better paper. The more material you give me to work with, the more I can help you. Um, when you're not following directions that I'm asking you to do, I don't want to say you necessarily make my job harder. I guess you actually make it easier. Sorry. Because there's less for me to do. But at the same time, there's also less I can do to help you because I don't necessarily have a clear vision of what it is that you're doing. And, again, 1 second. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to take a sinus pill here. Okay, so yeah, it's not that again, this is all part of a learning process. So I don't want you guys thinking I'm expecting you to do things, absolutely perfectly the first time around. That's not what it's about. But one of the things I've noticed, and believe me, it's not just your class, it's across the board, and it's not anything new. I think students, even back in my times, the Stone Ages, I think a lot of times you guys just want to get stuff done, and I think a lot of times what that comes at the expense of is you don't necessarily follow the directions. And like I said, when you don't, it kind of hamstrings me. And what I'm here to do is to help you. I want you all to get good grades here. Okay. I know that they have sent out, they being the administration, have sent out a thing where, if you finish with an F, you can change it to a U, which means, if for those of you that don't know this policy, all that means is you basically could change an F to a U, which is an unsatisfactory grade, and it wouldn't hurt your grade point average. Okay. So here's the whole thing. I wasn't born yesterday. There are some people in here, just by the nature of averages, who are going to fail this class. There are. And what that means is, if they fail, they don't have to take an F, they can take a U. I am sure there are some people in here who probably did a cartwheel when they heard that, because basically what that means is, and you know I don't mince words very well, what that means is basically you could do nothing from here on out and just say you want a U. And yes, you would have to take this class again, but it wouldn't hurt your grade point average any. So what I mean is, some of you guys who just, maybe thinking like this is an extended vacation, I guess you could treat it that way. I mean, you could do that in any class and just take a U. If you needed the class, which you all have to pass this class, then yes, you could take a U and you could take it again. Then there are people who, if you finish with a D, you can change it to an S, which means satisfactory, which basically means that doesn't impact your grade point average either. But because you need a C or higher to get credit for freshman comp, you'd still have to take the class again. I would imagine anybody who got a C or better would probably just want to take the grade. Okay. Well, where I'm going with this is simple. Okay. If you're not doing the work, and some of you may just not be able to do it, some of you may not have the technological capabilities, which is why that plan was put into place. But here's my point. If you have the capacity to do the work and you're just not doing it, then, there's only so much I can do to help you. And I would love for everybody to pass this class. But I realize that, one, even when we have full capability, there are almost always going to be people who fail a class. It's just the nature of teaching. And two, now that we don't have full capabilities, I think that a lot of people may be choosing to phone it in for whatever reason. And again, that's entirely your choice to do that. But what I am saying is, if you are trying, and some of you are, and you are turning stuff in, you have to remember that there's a list of directions that are going along with what you're doing for a reason. That reason is to help you get a high grade. So when you turn in an abstract or something, or in this case, what was supposed to be an abstract and an annotated bibliography, nobody turned in an annotated bibliography. So what that means is, if I really want to be as helpful as I could, I would have to go look up each one of your sources and see what those sources are. And unfortunately, I just don't have the time. I don't have the time to do that. If I was just teaching your class, I could, but I'm not. I've got 5 classes to teach. And so that's where doing things the right way the first time, even if it's not perfect, not only does it help me, it helps you. Okay. So what I want to do for today, kind of real quick, I'm going to go through sort of a PowerPoint that I had made. And in truth, I can accept responsibility too. I forgot to put it up online. I don't know that it would have even helped, just because it's more just kind of giving you pointers. It's not very specific, but it's something that, some of you may be able to look at and maybe take a concept from it and use it. So really quickly, I'm just going to pull it up. Again, I'm not saying it's the magic bullet, because it's not. We need to go to beginning. Okay. So what I was telling you guys about outside of class activities, these are things that will actually help you write the paper itself. And it could have helped you write an abstract. Okay. Exploring, planning, and drafting. These are all very important parts of the writing process. Remember, writing is a process. I get a sense with a lot of my students. Again, when I say a lot of my students, I don't just mean you guys. That, what you do is you write something, you sit down, you write something, and once you finish it, you go, okay, I'm done. And you hand it in. And I think there's very little exploring being done. I don't think there's much planning being done. And if you're only doing one writing, there's no drafting being done. Okay. So what that means is, you're not really going through a process. All you're doing is just sort of writing one thing and turning it in. It's almost like if I were to give you a pop quiz in class, that almost is sort of a parallel to what I think a lot of you are doing when you're handing in things to me. And what you have to understand is, again, like the lower the quality of what you hand into me, the less I can help you. Okay. I mean, that's the only way I can put it. I mean, the more thought, the more craft, the more content and detail that's there, the more I can go, okay, I see what this person's doing. Okay. Here's what we can do to make this better. Here's what we can work on. Okay. So again, when preparing to write a paper, you may find there are exercises that help get your brain going and generate a thought. Brainstorm. I talked about these briefly in the last lecture. Brainstorming is just writing down ideas, words, observations, or just general thoughts about a topic you may be thinking about writing on. They don't need to be complete. They don't need to necessarily be even elaborated on. That part comes later. Okay. Again, this is exploring, planning, and drafting. What that means is this comes in stages. Okay. What I mean by stages is not all of this stuff happens at one time. Okay. It comes as you're working. All right. Again, it's a process. And what I always tell people, because I usually had people do this in class, but I don't think it would work very well digitally or virtually. I just don't think these would work well. I think these are things you need to do on your own. And again, I'm not telling you to do these. I'm not going to grade you on doing this. These are things that are being brought to you to help you, because a lot of you guys maybe have never done these things. And one thing that I found out in doing these in class, probably 75% of the time, after students did these and we had conferences, students would tell me at least one of these exercises helped them. Okay. Now, maybe they were just, being nice to me. I don't know. Again, here's the thing. And I'm not saying this to sound snarky. I don't really care. I mean, if they don't help you, then don't do them. They're not required. What I mean is, I've said this before. I'm not big on wasting time. Okay. I'm not. I think you guys will realize that when we're in class and I'm giving a lecture or something, typically, I'm not talking about politics. I'm not talking about my own personal interests. I'm not talking about, things that don't usually involve what we're doing, because to me, I'm losing focus then, and that's a waste of time. Okay. So again, like if you just think this is going to be a waste of your time, I wouldn't try it, because if that's the attitude that you're going in with, then it's going to be a waste of your time. If you try brainstorming and you realize, this doesn't work, then don't do it. Okay. I mean, don't waste your time. Free writing. Free writing is almost like a stream of consciousness. What that means is you write and you just don't pick up your pen. You just write. Now, I don't just mean you just write about anything that pops into your head. What I mean is you have a topic in your mind, just write about it. Write about anything that comes to your mind about it. Just the difference between brainstorming and free writing is when you're free writing, it turns into more like a paragraph. Brainstorming is almost like a list. Okay. So free writing, sometimes you might end up going way off the track. That's fine. Other times, the reason that going off the track can be okay is it can lead you down a road you never thought you would go down. Because by the time you end up free writing, you may end up, let's say your original topic was, oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of one that hasn't been beaten to death. Let's say right now, okay, well, let's say you wanted to talk about the ills of technology, okay? You may end up going down a path where by the time you've ended your paper, you might be talking about this COVID-19 virus. That doesn't mean it's unrelated to the idea of technology and its ills. What it means is you've just gone down a different direction with it. And sometimes going down those different directions is what makes a paper interesting. Because if you're just going to write about, well, technology consists of the internet, social media, TV, radio, like what I mean is sooner or later, you're kind of going to hit a wall with that. It's not going to be interesting. Sometimes free writing will take you down a path that's interesting because it is consciousness. We talked about this in class. Like I remember one time, and I think it was Taya was talking about sometimes when you're writing, a lot of times you don't end up where you think you're going to end up. I don't, almost 9 times out of 10, I don't think I'm going to end up where I don't end up where I think I'm going to. And that's not to say that's always good. Sometimes it's not, but it can be if where you end up is something you can fit back into that original idea. And then finally, clustering. In the last lecture, if you go back and look, I showed you what a mind map looks like. Mind maps are good because they show, if you do them correctly, how ideas are connected to other related ideas. And what this means by clustering can be very effective in fully exploring the nexus of an idea is, and again, I'll actually bring this up just so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, now obviously, like mind mapping as a topic is not something you're going to be writing on. I know that. But what you'll see is this person here, the general topic is mind mapping. And what they've kind of done here is shown how they're kind of going to go about, it's almost like a blueprint of what they're going to do, at least an idea. Okay. Again, you got to remember, these are all ideas. They're nothing firm. Okay. Like writing doesn't become firm until you've done exactly what you want to do with it and you hand it in. That's when it's firm. Until then, it's almost all just sort of words in space, if that makes sense. Okay. So like what this person has in mind, for example, is mind mapping is their main idea. Well, let's say they wanted to start out and it would make sense. They're going to define it for you. Okay. And then where they have themselves going is maybe how mind mapping helps you acquire knowledge on something. And they have a graphic. I don't necessarily want you guys to use graphics in these papers. They're too short. I mean, a 5-page paper probably shouldn't have graphics in it. Okay. And then they go, let's say their next paragraph after knowledge would be, okay, then I'm going to go to the uses of the knowledge. Then I'm going to explain how you can learn things by doing it, how it can lead to assessment. Okay. And examples of assessment. Now, I would argue this is probably something that a teacher has developed. Okay. Because again, like you guys aren't concerned about assessment. Assessment is what teachers use. Assessment's just another fancy word for grading. Okay. Then mind mapping, the process of it and how it's systematic. Okay. Or maybe even how it's not. Because frankly, I don't think mind mapping is systematic. Variations of mind mapping. Okay. Then tools you can use to mind map. And then they're getting into technology here, apps, web, other. Okay. So what I'm trying to show you is mind maps can be good because what you can end up doing is by starting out with something as broad as mind mapping, this person theoretically could have narrowed it down to something as simple as using apps on their phone to help them mind map, using the web to help them mind map. Again, forms of assessment that might be able to be tied into mind mapping. What I'm getting at is by starting here and moving outward, they end up moving kind of far away from this. And a lot of times that's how you get your most interesting ideas, okay? Is because if your paper was just going to be these 4 things and that was all you were going to talk about, then I think your paper would be very obvious. You know, like it would just be very simplistic. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not expecting you guys to write me a 5-page research paper that's publishable. That's not what this is about either. I think you guys know me well enough to know by now that I'm a pretty reasonable guy. I'm looking at you guys as freshman writers who have obvious limitations because you're freshman writers. And again, I don't want anybody hearing that thinking that's me attacking you. That's the way I've been teaching for 17 years. You guys are not professional writers. If you were, you would not be in this class. Okay? But that's going to bring me back to my point that I started out with. You don't have to be a professional writer to follow the directions that I'm asking you to follow. Just do what I'm asking you to do, and it makes it easier on all of us because we don't have to waste time trying to figure out what exactly it is you're doing. When I get what you hand in, I already know. I should know pretty clearly what you're doing. Okay? So what I wanted to do was actually look at 1 or 2 of the ones that was handed in and kind of show you what exactly I got handed in and why these things maybe either could work or don't work. Okay. Now, I'm going to blow this up. This abstract, it's a good length. Okay. This is about what it should be. We get down here to bibliography. The problem should be very evident. Okay. The problem is there's no annotations. So I don't know what these are about. And the other thing is the citations are wrong. Okay. So again, those are things that would need to be fixed. But let's just go ahead and read this. And I'm going to kind of go through and explain to you things that maybe could have been done better or differently. Okay. The article, The Black Culture Industry, was written by Ellis Cashmore. And there are some typos in here. So I'm going to try to read it, without the typos. A professor of sociology at Ashton University School of Languages and Social Sciences. In the article, he discusses in depth the relationship between Black culture, affluence, and racial interaction. In doing this, allows the reader to comprehend the revolution of race relations and how culture and art can be used by the wealthy and powerful to manage a race. Okay. Let's key in on this. But we're going to return to it. Cashmore critically acclaims how African American culture, again, let me go up here to my track changes. Okay. How African American culture has become a commodity to white-owned corporations. This author's target audience is people who are interested in knowing how white supremacists use our own culture against us to get monetary gain. Okay? This would be like, again, I'm just trying to make this as tight as I can. So I asked the question, and this probably ought to be supremacists. Actually, my mouse doesn't work right, so. So I asked the question, are they really culturally appropriating, or was the system designed for blacks to fail? Okay, here's another one that I think needs to be highlighted. African Americans aren't celebrated or commemorated when someone imitates the look because the black culture is a commodity, something that can be bought and sold like any other type of merchandise. This particular group of people are the only group not to receive reparations for being enslaved for 400 years. Now, hold on 1 minute. I need to go get some water because my throat is getting dry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so if we go to my PowerPoint, drafting a working thesis. Okay, now this is important because when you write an abstract, one of the main things that you're doing is you're focusing on whatever you think your main idea is going to be. Okay, now I realize for some of you, there's probably a certain level of confusion that I understand when it comes to the term abstract, because abstract from someone who's already written the article. Okay, so what that means is, yeah, they ought to be able to write an abstract really quickly. The article is already done. Okay, but as I explained last Thursday, the reason you guys are writing what we also call an abstract or a prospectus is so that the person who's reading it knows ahead of time whether or not what you're writing about is. Drafting a working thesis is really important because it gives your reader, in this case me, an idea of what it is you need to do to get to where it is you want to go. Okay, so again, and this is, like I said, something that would have been done in class. Okay, as I talked about on Thursday, commonly research and argument papers begin with a question. When you answer a question, that's usually how you arrive at a thesis statement. Perhaps you begin with asking a question like this. And again, this was already talked about, but some of you didn't see it, and I would like to go over it again. Okay. Right now, we know in America, we have, and not just the COVID thing, but right now, what we know is, we know that, God bless the people who are working in the hospitals and everything else at this point in time, because it's not on them. But we also know that the healthcare industry is not probably doing all that it can do to maintain. There'd be no need for a healthcare industry. Okay. And what we're seeing now is this. We had a healthcare industry, or we have one in place. We do. But let's look at how it's responded to this pandemic. I'm not saying that every country or any country or even our country ought to be prepared for something like this, because I think just about every country got caught with their pants down with this COVID virus. No country, I mean, look across the board. No country was ready for this. Okay, none of them were. So the point I'm getting at is, okay, let's say I wanted to write a paper about healthcare. So I might start out by saying, what advantages could companies gain by instituting a mandatory wellness policy for employees? Okay, so for example, one of the things that we're noticing now, and in fact, just today, South Carolina has outlawed burning things outside, whether it's burning leaves, whether it's burning trash, whether it's, raising a forest, doesn't matter. The reason for it is because so many people who are walking around who may have COVID or they may be susceptible to it, the smoke it only exacerbates that. Okay. So taking that idea one step further, we know, at least we should, cigarettes aren't healthy. Okay. And again, I'm not trying to preach to you all. I'm just, you can argue like people have been arguing forever. Does it cause cancer? Does it cause this? Does it cause that? I'm not a medical doctor. I couldn't prove those things to you. But I think conventional common sense would dictate to you, anytime you're putting smoke into your lungs, it's probably not healthy. Okay. Well, one of the things companies could do, for instance, to institute a mandatory wellness policy would be this. Okay. Let's say a small company has 20 employees. Let's say 5 of them smoke. Okay. That's 1/4. What they could do potentially would be offer incentives to get these people to stop smoking, because here's the reason why it would help a company, especially a small one. What happens when, for example, something like this COVID virus hits? Most of the people who are getting this disease are surviving it. Okay. Like, I know there's been a lot of deaths, but we also need to look at numbers and be mindful of the fact that it's not the plague. Okay. I mean, it's not wiping people out the moment they get it. And where I'm going with this is this. One thing they have realized, though, is that people who are getting it, who are smokers, their healing time, the amount of time it takes them to get better is greatly pushed back because they're smokers. And what happens when people get sick and their rehab times are pushed back is companies lose money. Companies lose employees. Companies typically have to keep paying smokers to stop smoking. That way, when they do get sick, they ideally don't miss as much work. Now, that's probably not where I'm going here. I haven't looked at this slide in a while, but I'm just giving you a point. Okay. So could you come up with a thesis statement answering this question? One thing you want to do, whatever your argument is make sure that it's tenable. Okay. I can't outline that. What that means is it's defensible. Okay. Like if you were to say, what we could do is just outlaw cigarettes. Well, okay, they've tried that and they've tried that and they've tried that. That's not going to happen, guys. I mean, it's not. Okay. So what I mean is your argument shouldn't be something that's like wishful thinking. Like in a perfect world, people wouldn't be mean. Well, every one of us knows in this world, there are mean people out there. You're not going to change that. Okay. Pardon me. Breakfast. Another thing you may want to think about a thesis having is a topic idea. And the second one is a modifier. Okay. What a modifier is, there was a guy named Stephen Toulmin, Toulmin, for those of you who are curious about Stephen Toulmin. And he came up with an idea that basically a thesis statement needs what's called a qualifier. Okay. What that means is something that essentially modifies or tightens up your idea. Okay. So here would be part 1 of my thesis. Although employers may stand to spend more money in the short term on wellness plans for employees, comma, that's part 1. And this is your qualifier, part 2. They will save money in the long run by not having to pay for major surgeries or procedures that unhealthy employees may require. Okay. So again, what that means is like, if you've had a guy working at your company for 30 years who smokes a pack a day, okay, the chances are sooner or later that employee is going to have some major health issues. Well, if that person is still employed by you and has health care, you're going to have to, as an employer, you're going to have to pay for part of that. Okay, maybe all of it. But if you could get that person at age 30 to stop smoking, then by the time they're 60, that person is going to be in much better physical health than they would be if they were smoking for 30 years on top of it. Okay. Think about this. Is your thesis statement functional? Does it state a position? Moreover, is it arguable? Remember, thesis statements are statements that are opinions that should be defensible. But at this point in time, what I wanted you guys to do was just get your thoughts together. Collecting data to support your argument comes when you have a working thesis that you think you can weave into an entire paper. Also, the key thing to remember for this paper, I don't want 3 5s. Okay? Don't want 3 5s. And again, this is from an old textbook, so this isn't going to help you any. Okay, so that's the end of the slideshow. So let's go back. And what I want to do for a minute is just say, okay, and I mentioned this in class before, but again, I don't expect that, you noted it or wrote it down or even remember it, but it is something that's important to remember. There are 3 things, that a thesis should not be. One of them is a question, okay? Because if your thesis statement is a question, then you're not telling your reader where you stand on something. Okay. Again, remember, thesis statements come from research questions. Okay. You come up with a question that you want to answer. Then once you've answered it, typically that becomes your thesis. When you have a question, you're still in that idea stage of what is it that I'm trying to say? And a reader shouldn't be having to decipher what it is you're trying to say. What they should be trying to decipher is whether or not what you're trying to say makes sense, is viable, works, etc. Okay? Part 2 of what a thesis sentence should not be. It should not be someone else's quote. Okay? A thesis statement should be your idea. Does that mean your thesis statement is an idea that has never been said before? No. Again, you guys aren't there yet. And I would honestly argue the idea the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. When I wrote my dissertation, for example, it was not an idea that had never been said. At least I don't think it was. It was me kind of taking a pre-existing idea and adding a twist to it. Okay? So again, like, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel to write a thesis statement. Part 3. Your thesis statement should never be a fact. Okay? Simple reason there. Research papers are intended to have an idea that you are arguing or defending. You can't argue a fact. Okay? If someone were to put as their thesis statement, the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. That is not a thesis statement. That's a fact. Okay? If you were going to say something like, the Declaration of Independence was written in 1776, and because that was 245 years ago, there need to be some changes made to it. Boom. Now you have a thesis because you have an idea that you have qualified that original statement with. The original statement was the Declaration of Independence was written in 1776. That is a fact. That shows a reader that your thesis is oriented in fact. But the qualifier is things need to be changed about it because it's an old document. Okay, that's the idea. Then your paper would go into various parts of the Declaration of Independence that you feel like are outdated or that need to be changed or that need to be altered to meet the world that we live in. Okay, so that's sort of what I was looking for you to do with the abstracts. Now, I have some abstracts here. Let's go back to this one, okay? So here's, when I look at this, what I see as being red flags. Here's the first one. And I just got done talking about this. This particular group of people, and I think this is worded wrong syntactically. I think what this person wants to ask here is this particular group of people the only group not to receive reparations for being enslaved for 400 years? Okay. The question is, or the problem is, this is a question. It's not a statement. So me reading this paper, if this was the opening, what I would be asking myself is, well, okay, sorry. Okay, well, are they? Where is this going? Like what's this question leading into? Whereas if you made it into a statement and you said something like, because African Americans throughout the history of the United States have been treated unfairly, I believe that they are owed reparations for having been enslaved and not given equal rights over the last 400 years, something like that. See, then it becomes an idea. But right now, what you have here, this isn't an idea. This is a question. This is what we call, and I'm going to write on here because I'm not going to save it. That's an interrogative, okay? Those of you who are good with words, and some of you guys in here are very good at looking at a word and figuring out what it means, okay? If you look at the root here, you should figure out fairly quickly what that root is. Interrogate. To interrogate someone means to ask them a question or a series of questions. Okay? You're not writing this paper to interrogate a reader. You're writing a research paper to inform them. So right there is probably the biggest red flag with this particular abstract. Now, why did I highlight these other points in here? Now, even though this part here is admittedly, and this writer did a good job here by telling you where they got their source information. Okay. However, there is a way that I think, if I were writing this paper, based on what I read here, this probably would fit better here. Now, granted, let me just show you what I'm doing here. Okay. So what you've got here now is an idea. The relationship between Black culture, affluence, and race interaction in doing this allows the reader to comprehend the revolution of race relations and how culture and art can be used by the wealthy and the powerful to manage a race. Okay. Now, as I said before, we know that this idea came from this guy. Okay. Now, that's fine. What you could do is take this main idea that came from him. You can still make this a thesis by tweaking it and kind of make it your own. Okay. So, for example, see, I really like this part here. There are some really strong points in this. It's just, again, this is a learning process. The way that this process works is what you do is you figure out how to structure something in a way that makes it streamlined and makes it fit together in a way that somebody reading this goes, okay, the light bulb is on. I got it. Okay. Now, let me go back through and read this really quickly one more time. And then what we'll do is we'll figure out why I did what I did here and what we can do to make this work appropriately without necessarily riffing someone else's idea for the thesis. Okay. The article, The Black Cultural Industry, and this should be is, written by Ellis Cashmore, a professor of sociology at Ashton University School of Languages and Social Sciences. Cashmore critically acclaims how African-American culture has become a commodity to white-owned corporations. Now, I'm not sure that's the right word, critically acclaims. I would have to know more about the article, but because this doesn't give me an abstract, an annotation, I don't necessarily know what this means. I don't know if the writer here is telling me that he thinks it's good, because acclaim is like, it means that's good. Acclaim is a good word. I almost think this person wants to use the word proclaim, but either way, acclaims how African-American culture has become a commodity to white-owned corporations. This author's target audience is people who are interested in knowing how white supremacists use our own culture against us for monetary gain. So I asked the question, are they really culturally appropriating, or was the system designed for blacks to fail? Okay, now I think you would need to clarify the system, what exactly that means. But here's again where I almost ask myself, is this actually your research question? And what I mean by that again is, if you saw the lecture that I gave on Thursday, is this the question you would ask yourself in order to come up with a thesis? Because to me, I feel like it could be. African Americans aren't celebrated or commemorated when someone imitates the look, because the black culture is a commodity, something that can be bought and sold like any other type of merchandise. The relationship between black culture, affluence, and race interaction allows the reader to comprehend the revolution of race relations and how culture and art can be used by the wealthy and powerful to manage a race. Okay, so again, what I'm showing you right now is the drafting process. So what I'm looking at now, though, is this. Okay, now that I've gone back through and looked, I see this idea really is Ellis Cashmore's. So the more I look at it, the more I think this is a good idea for a thesis, but you're also still kind of riffing him. So what if we put it here? Cashmore critically acclaims how African-American culture has become a commodity to white-owned corporations. This author's, I would just say his, target audience is people who are interested in knowing how white supremacists use our own culture against us for monetary gain. The relationship between black culture, affluence, and race interaction allows the reader to comprehend the revolution of race relations and how culture and art can be used by the wealthy and powerful to manage a race. So I asked the question, are they really culturally appropriating, or was the system designed for blacks to fail? And here's the thing. I don't think you need this here. Because you see, again, this is preliminary stuff. This is stuff that should probably have come before you wrote this. So, in other words, the research question, I actually think, you answer here. And I think that this almost becomes your thesis. African Americans aren't celebrated or commemorated when someone imitates, and it would probably be their look, because the black culture is a commodity, something that can be bought and sold like any other type of merchandise. Okay, so let's go back and reread it now and see if it works better. And now you have to understand, I'm not saying this is perfect. I don't want you guys thinking that I'm saying Dr. Root did this, so it must be right. What I'm saying is, when I have a conference with you, for example, this is the kind of stuff we would go over. It would be a way to take what you already have here and just reshape it to make it work. I'm not out to change your topic. Okay. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is take what you have and make it work better. Okay. So let's go one more time through this. The article, The Black Culture Industry, is written by Ellis Cashmore, a professor of sociology at Ashton University's School of Languages and Social Sciences. Cashmore critically acclaims how African American culture has become a commodity to white-owned corporations. His target audience is people who are interested in knowing how white supremacists use our own culture against us for monetary gain. The relationship between black culture, affluence, and race interaction, probably racial, again, I'm trying to tighten it up, allows the reader to comprehend the revolution of race relations and how culture and art can be used by the wealthy and powerful to manage a race. So you see right here, what you've got is a core idea. And actually, I think that might be evolution. Okay. Now, why did I boldface this? Because if you look, see, this is all going back to what I've been trying to do with the paragraphing thing, is letting you all, or trying to show you all how making your ideas marshal together and streamline together becomes so important in how a reader absorbs your message. The reason I boldface this is, look at how nicely this filters into this. See, so I asked the question, blah, blah, blah. It really doesn't have a place there. Like, what I mean is, we don't need to know what question you asked yourself prior to writing this paper. What we need to know basically is the answer that you came up with, which is your thesis. So if we read this last part, the relationship between black culture, affluence, and racial interaction allows the reader to comprehend the evolution of race relations and how culture and art can be used by the wealthy and the powerful to manage a race. African Americans aren't celebrated or commemorated when someone imitates their look, because the black culture is a commodity, something that can be bought and sold like any other type of merchandise. This now, granted, I'm not telling you no one's ever said that before, because they have. But where I'm going with this is simple. This right here was the writer's own idea. It didn't come from this article, okay? Or at least it wasn't directly related to it. So what this person does is, when you reiterate this the way that I've done here, they've taken what this author has said and they have used it to bolster their argument, which is African Americans aren't celebrated or commemorated when someone imitates their look, because the black culture is a commodity, something that can be bought and sold like any other type of merchandise. Okay, so where am I going to go from here? think about this. Think about mind mapping for just 1 second. Think about how well mind mapping would work with this particular topic. Cultural appropriation. Definition. Graphic, we're forgetting about. You're not going to use graphics in this, okay? Definition. Uses. A process, I don't know, because again, process, this is something, I suspect was created by a teacher. And what they're trying to do by giving you mind mapping as a topic is show you how the process is done. But again, things like this, uses of it, examples of it, definition of it, a knowledge of it. Again, I don't know how tools would necessarily fit into it unless the person writing this felt like they wanted to explain how the world we live in, there are certain tools that maybe enable cultural appropriation to either be more acceptable or more widespread. I mean, I think there are plenty of those, but I don't know that that would fit what this person is doing, but these ones definitely would. So again, like a mind map might work really well for this. Like there are so many different forms of cultural appropriation or misappropriation, however you want to call it. I mean, think about I'll give you a good idea about this. Actually, I don't even know the name of the show. My wife watches it. Frankly, I think it's kind of a ridiculous show, but there's some show on like I want to say maybe Lifetime or Hallmark or something like that. And it's about these people who, at least from what I've seen, they've met somebody who is American, and basically what their goal is and they met them online. Okay, so maybe tools would be usable here. Okay, again, this is how a mind map works. So what these people have done is they've used like the internet to meet somebody who's American. And their goal is to marry the person and to become an American citizen. So there's this one couple on there, and there's a guy in Nigeria, I believe, who is like a I don't want to say like a rap artist, but he's like a musician. And obviously, when this woman that he met online, who, like, from the times I've watched her, she seems like a jerk, but that's just me. She goes to visit him in Nigeria. Okay. And obviously, like in Nigeria, people who are, I guess maybe a word would be like authentic or native Nigerians, you know, they don't dress like American people do. Okay. Like they don't wear blue jeans and t-shirts. They wear like what we would call sort of like their authentic garb. And cultural appropriation would be like this annoying white lady going to Nigeria and wearing Nigerian garb, and trying to pass herself off as being something she's not, which is like an authentic Nigerian. Well, she's not. She's not that. Okay. Well, what I mean is, again, like that's a form of cultural appropriation. And that just means dressing like somebody who is African would dress. Okay. It's appropriating and probably misappropriating. Another one people I know, that a lot of people have a problem with is like, in America, a lot of cultures. It's not just the white culture, which is something else that this paper could dive into. Like the whole culture of hip hop, and how a lot of white people have sort of infringed on it and almost in their own way kind of tried to make it their own, when really in probably 90% of the cases, the hip hop culture originated with African Americans. The only, like I said, small section of people who would fit into an outside group, and I would argue they were probably even like a subculture, would be like the Beastie Boys were one of the first they were one of the first rap groups that was mainstream. They were, they were on the same record label with like, they were on Def Jam with like Run DMC and, gosh, I don't know who else. LL Cool J was on Def Jam. They might be one of the few groups who would be considered authentic. But what I'm saying is people who came along later, like Vanilla Ice, okay, considered to be majorly an appropriator of Black culture. So what it means basically is like Vanilla Ice, I don't know. I know now he has a TV show too, where he redoes houses or something, like he flips houses. But the question would be, how many millions of dollars did he make by appropriating Black culture? Okay, again, like these are things where you can go and you could almost kind of turn this into a historical paper if you were willing to do your research. Like, when did that start? Like, for example, I mean, think about it. A group that was highly maligned by the mainstream, being African Americans, for centuries. And then all of a sudden, white people start acting like them, or other groups start acting like them. It's very strange. Why would they do that if there wasn't something to be gained by it? You understand what I mean? These are the kind of things that should be kind of flowing through your mind as you write a topic like this. Because ideally, based on what we saw here, that's the idea that's being presented. Basically, that to this writer, and I think it's a very good research topic. To this writer, the fact is, because, and I'm assuming what they mean is largely white people, because white people are the majority of people in this country, by appropriating Black culture, basically they took its identity away. And the reason they took its identity away was to make money on it. So essentially, it was just another example of the dominant group taking something from the minority group that belonged to them and making it their own so that they can profit from it, which is, again, why I don't think that question was needed in there about, so, was this all part of the plan that Black people were being set up to fail? I don't think you need to put that in there, because I think this, as your thesis, shows us as a reader what, and again, like I said, I've got the question there and I hashed it out. Was it really just more of a thing that the dominant culture took away the defining characteristics of the minority culture because they were in a position to do that? Because if that's your perspective, then you have a lot of avenues to go down to build off of that, right? I mean, some people might even say, like, let me give you a quick example. When I went to Virginia Tech, it wasn't, excuse me, it wasn't nearly as big as it is now. I think now it has like 33,000 students. When I went there, it had about 25,000 students. And I'm going to pull out a ballpark figure. I could go online and find it. I mean, again, this is where research comes into play. I could go online and find it. I bet you when I went to Virginia Tech, I would say it wasn't even 1/10 Black. I mean, you were hard pressed, literally, to walk across campus and see a Black face. You just did not see very many Black people there. Why is that? I don't know. Again, that's why you do research. Why is that? I could not tell you. I don't have an answer for it. But again, That's why you do research. What I'm saying is this, though. This is where I'm going with my point. Okay. So let's use 1998, Blacksburg, Virginia, as kind of a litmus test there. Okay. So let's say the population of Black people there, we'll just pull out a nice round number and say 10%. Okay. That means there were 2,500 Black people in a 25,000 student school. Okay. Claflin has about 2,000 students, right? That would be the equivalent of if there were 200 white students at Claflin, the percentage would be the same. So here would be my question, because I'm not African American. See, I can only look at things through my own lens as a white guy. As an African American, do you feel like that's inappropriate because Claflin is an HBCU? Like, should there be a quota on how many white people are allowed to go there? Should white people be allowed to go there? That's what I'm asking. Like, again, these are all cultural appropriation questions, because again, HBCUs, whether you think of them this way or not, it's a culture. And what I'm saying is, if white people end up becoming a significant bulk of the population at an HBCU, what happens to that original HBCU culture? Well, it's going to change, right? So what I'm saying is, basically, that idea even fits in here, because what you're saying right here, I think that this is your key, and I love the way it's worded too. And again, I'm not giving away names. I love the way that this person worded this. It's a commodity. Think about how universities run. Universities don't run for free. You have to pay. They cost money. Okay? And so what I'm getting at is, if all of a sudden Claflin becomes a school that's 50% white, and it became that way because white people could afford to go there and just decided they wanted to, is that a way of Black culture being a commodity that people can just buy or buy into? See, again, this is the point I'm making, where you shouldn't just have some monochromatic view. You should be able to give your reader examples of where this has occurred. Okay. And again, the way mind mapping, I think, works, and to make things interesting, is it helps you come up with ideas like those maybe more easily than something like free writing would. Because I think what happens with free writing is you get stuck in your own dogma. You understand what I mean? You get stuck thinking what you're thinking, and that's basically all you're going to get. Well, when you mind map, a lot of times what you can end up with is you end up way out here. You end up way out here. You end up way out here. You end up pretty far from your original topic, which gives you more to work with. And it also means you're going to have to think more deeply. That's the point of these papers, guys. I've said this before. I've said it again. My job here, yes, is to teach you to be better writers. It is. That's my job. Okay. But here's the other thing. In this world, we are rapidly losing the ability to think for ourselves. If I can get you all to walk out of this class being better thinkers, man, I would be happy with that. I'd love it if you became better writers. And for what it's worth, I think some of you have shown some improvement. I don't necessarily think that has anything to do with me. I think it's just the act of writing and also being taught how to do it correctly. And again, that's where paragraphing comes in too. You can't just blob it all together. Well, let me talk about hip hop. Let me talk about HBCUs. Let me talk about clothing. Let me talk about, I don't know, interracial relationships, whatever it is you want to talk about. You can't just plop it all together into one paragraph, because it doesn't give your reader an idea of where those ideas are coming into play and how you got there with them. That's why you have to know how to work paragraphs into a paper. Okay. So here's where I'm going with this. Initially, this abstract, I would say, meh, it was okay, because I think the ideas were here, but they weren't shaped in a way that gave me much of an idea of exactly what this person was trying to do. Now, am I saying what I did here is what they were trying to do? No, I'm not, because I'm not in that person's head. But what I am trying to show you is if it was written like this and they handed this in, I can run with this and I can help you with this, just the way I've done in the last 10 minutes. But whenever you have what you had here at first, it makes it very hard on me, particularly when you have a question for a thesis, because I don't know where you're going with it. I don't know what your objective is. Now you have an objective. Now I see what you mean. Then we can go with the idea that basically people, the mass culture, have treated the Black culture, which is probably considered a subculture, they've treated it like something to be bought and sold. And a culture is not something that should be bought and sold. It's just not. I mean, again, like my background is, I'm trying to think of the phrase for it. Probably, I guess they would say Anglo, I guess Anglo. I'm Irish, English, Scotch on my dad's side. My mom's side is like German, Hungarian, and maybe, I almost want to say maybe even Welsh. But my point is this. Those are cultures. They all come with their own unique values. Think about even things like food, okay? Like, for example, and I'll give another quick one. Like I said, I don't want to run way over time here. I'm just trying to give you guys something to think about. Let me go back to my stream here. Okay, I'm running out of time. This is where I'll wrap up. Think about even something like food. Food is a cultural staple. Okay. One of the things that Dr. Stearns, who teaches sociology across the hall from me, and myself have talked about before, is how, you know, a lot of foods that are now considered to be like trendy actually began as slave food, because slaves were given, obviously, you know, anybody who owned slaves, you have to feed them. I mean, no matter how big of a, you know, a jerk you are for owning slaves, you have to feed them, because if you don't, I mean, then, you know, they're of no value to you. So what they used to do, and again, this is a history lesson because I'm a history nerd. Sorry. They would give slaves kind of like the leftover food that the slave owners didn't want to eat. Well, believe it or not, and I know this is hard to believe because, you know, they're so popular, chicken wings were one of them, because the wings were considered like an undesirable piece of the bird. So when it came time to, you know, give slaves some meat to eat, which they probably didn't actually get a lot of, if the family was eating chicken, they would a lot of times give the slaves the wings. Okay. Well, nowadays we think about, I mean, go on to the Food Network. I love watching the Food Network. Look at all the dumb, and I almost cursed. Look at all the dumb stuff people do with wings now. I mean, they've made them into like gourmet, you know, like let's make them chocolate sauce covered with a truffle infusion. You know, I mean, they're chicken wings. They're, you know, they're chicken wings. You know, again, you look at my skin color, you can see I'm as white gets. Dr. Root is not going to eat no chocolate covered truffle stuffed wing. I want it either, you know, I want it barbecued. I want it, you know, seasoned. I want it sauced. I want it fried. I want it. What my point is They weren't, it wasn't a food that was designed to be, like gourmet. It was designed so people could eat and be nourished. That was it. And now we've made it into something it wasn't. So again, it's an idea that like Irish people eating Irish stew, or bangers and mash, which if you don't know what that is, it's like breakfast sausages with like a corned beef hash with it. And now you go on the cooking channels and you see these people, and they've made these foods into these big, like highfalutin, complicated dishes. They were never intended to be that. You know why most cultures, especially poor ones, that's why I brought the Irish in, because Irish people were, and it still is, a poor country. They ate it because it was filling. That's why they ate it. You ever eat sausage for breakfast? You ever eat potatoes? They're filling. It's filling food. Okay? It wasn't meant to be glamorized. My point is not to take away from the point of this, but what I mean is there's a lot of times where cultures are appropriated or misappropriated. But the point of this paper would be, I would think, to show me examples of that and how white people or whatever culture has profited off of something that was predominantly or is predominantly African American. So here's the point of this, okay, since I'm about out of time. This is a good topic. I love this topic, but it wasn't orchestrated well, okay? You have to make the stuff fit together in a way that the person reading it goes, I get it. Now I'm ready to move into the next paragraphs and see what's this person going to do to show me these points. How did white people or just American culture as a whole benefit by stealing from African Americans? How did that happen? When did it start? Why do you think it occurred? These are things that are going to make a research paper interesting. Okay? And for those of you who did this exercise, there are only a handful of you who did. I'm going to shoot you an email. I'm going to tweak around with what you've got, and I'm going to set up conferences for tomorrow and Thursday. We won't do a live stream on Thursday. Okay? Now, in the meantime, if any of you watch this and you can get me an abstract by, say, and I'll put this in Moodle, by like midnight, I will read yours and I will set up a conference with you. Otherwise, if you don't get me one, I can't help you because, again, I'm teaching 5 classes. I've got to grade research papers this week. I've got for my lit class. I have a lot on my plate, but I want to help anyone in here who wants my help. Okay, that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help you. The person who wrote this, please do not think at all that this was intended to bash anything you did. It wasn't. As I told you before, you had everything in here I think you needed to make this work. It just needed to be reshaped. And that's what I'm trying to get you guys to understand about this whole process of writing. You know, I may have used this quote before in here, but this is where I'm going to end. Okay. John Milton, you can look him up. He wrote Paradise Lost. The great English epic poem. People said that God spoke to John Milton through his pen. Very few people out there are that fortunate. Very few people out there are that talented. It took me 3 years to write a book. It probably would have taken John Milton maybe 2 weeks to write the book I wrote. My point is God doesn't speak through my pen. I'm just not that talented. Most of us aren't. So what does that mean? You have to work at this. You can't just write one thing and think, okay, well, I've written it, so it's as good as gold, it's done. That's not how writing works. It just isn't. And I think if you go around and you ask any English teacher on our campus, they're going to tell you the same thing. It's a process. It takes work. It's hard work. Research is hard to do. But that's why you need to have a good prospectus, because if you don't, it's like I said the other day, it's like using a roadmap or using a GPS and either taking the roadmap and crumpling it up and throwing it away, or turning off your GPS when you don't know how to get where you're going. If you don't know how to get to where you're going, how are you supposed to get there? The way that you get there is by writing an abstract that gives not only your reader, but yourself an idea of what you're doing, where you're going, and what you need to do to get there. Okay. So that's the end of today's lecture. I hope that helps you. The person whose example I used, thank you. It helped. And again, after I upload this video to Moodle, to YouTube, I'm going to put some stuff on Moodle, and I want to try to set up conferences with you guys. I know I have a conference tomorrow, a video conference with my boss and the dean. So it'll have to be, I'll have to work it around those times. But what I'm going to do is send you sort of like a message, and I would like you to give me like 3 times that would work for you on either Wednesday or Thursday. And we can have about a 15 to 30-minute conference, depending upon what you need to do. And we can just go from there. Okay. So that's my plan. I'll put it in writing so that you know what's going on. And that's what we'll be doing for the rest of the week. Okay. So thanks. I hope you go back and watch this. I think it will help you. And until then, again, be smart, stay healthy, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. And I will be talking to you, especially those of you who turn something in. Just be looking out on Moodle and in your email for a message from me. Okay. Thank you all. Bye.